like to call the session of the Ferguson Commission to order. Today is April 27th, and this is our 10th commission meeting. Happy that you are all here today to be with us, and our first order of business is to conduct a roll call to confirm on record who is in attendance of the commission's meeting. So at this time, commissioners, when I call your name, if you would please signify by saying present that you are with us. Reverend Starsky Wilson is on his way. Rich McClure.
Here.
Kevin Albrand.
Here.
Rasheen Aldridge. Okay. He's making his arrival. Pastor Tracy Blackman, we know that she has an excused absence. T.R. Carr.
Here.
Gabe Gore.
Here.
Becky James Hatter has an excused absence. Dan Isom.
Here.
Scott Negwar has an excused absence. Brittany Packnett.
Here.
Felicia Pulliam.
Here.
Pat Sly.
Here.
Grayling Tobias has an excused absence on medical leave. Byron Watson.
Here.
And Rose Windmiller.
Here.
And I did not forget anyone, is that correct? All right. So with that, Reverend David Danoon is with us to do our invocation. Would you please come at this time? David represents First Congregational Church of Webster Groves, UCC. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. I also represent the Interfaith Partnership of Greater St. Louis. Let us pray. God of peace, Spirit of living justice, Redeemer of those who seek new ways because their familiar ways just won't do anymore. We gather in this moment to consider present pain and new directions. For we cannot stay as we are. We cannot afford to stay as we are. Make yourself known to us in the voices of all who speak here this evening. Remind us of your grace. Prevent us from castigating or despising or judging. Catch our tongues if we presume toward self-righteousness. Open our hearts to new and genuine possibilities, or even some old ones that we didn't try because they seemed to be asking too much of us before. Change our minds about what we can be, about what can be, and then hold us all accountable to the change of which we speak, so that none of us imagine ourselves victims, and each of us is transformed into a blessed servant of yours. Then may all our communities become the beloved community of which you have spoken and taught, in faith that we just wish our faiths could emulate. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Danoon, for those words of encouragement. At this time, we are graced to be here at the YMCA, of which I would like to check to see if Tim Helm is in fact in the room. If not, we would like to ask Ms. Senia Bosman, who is the Senior VP of Administrative Services for the Gateway Region, to render us a welcome at this time. Senia, good friend and sister and colleague, we're very grateful to have you.
Good evening. On behalf of our President and CEO, Tim Helm, I'd like to welcome the commissioners as well as invited guests here to our facility. We are honored that you had chosen our facility to have your meeting, and we think you will find it accommodating. And I'd like to also extend an opportunity, if you're interested in receiving a tour to see the facility post your meeting, please, we have staff that will be available to do that. We operate this facility to serve this community in partnership with the City of St. Louis. It's one of our newer facilities, and we have a number of accommodations. And so again, we appreciate you selecting this site for your meeting, and we wish you a productive meeting and a pleasant visit at our facility here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senia. Thank you for your warm welcome, and Reverend Denton, thank you for your willingness to be here and to open our meeting appropriately. My name is Rich McClure. I'm one of the co-chairs of the commission, and on behalf of my co-chair, Reverend Starsky Wilson, whose plane was delayed, or he would be here now, but he'll be here very shortly, we want to thank you for coming here to the Carondelet neighborhood and being a part of this discussion tonight. We hope you find it informative, and we hope that you will certainly take the time to participate fully in our session this evening. This evening's session follows two sessions that we have had. This is our 10th meeting, and meetings 8 and 9 were on the topic of racial equity and reconciliation. We had two very thoughtful and productive meetings with extensive community engagement, and we learned a lot, and we will continue to learn a lot about this cross-cutting purpose that truly does pervade all of our work, and you'll hear more about that this evening. We have had very productive working group meetings since we last met and prior to the last meeting. I think I've counted 5 working group meetings that have had very extensive community participation. They've been in places like the Parents as Teachers Center in North County, as well as the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And the participation has been full and extensive, and much of what you see tonight comes from those sessions where the community and our working group members partnered together to learn and to fashion calls to action. So tonight we gather not to discuss any one particular problem, but we gather to discuss prospective solutions that have been identified in concert with the community. This represents the midpoint in our work, roughly, and so we thought it was an important time to step back and reflect on what we've learned and the calls to action that have been made. And so tonight, that will be the deep dive that we will do. From the beginning of our work, we committed that we would do this work with a bent toward action. And so tonight, we believe you will see that. So as you look through the topical priorities that have been identified by the community, many of you participated in those sessions, then you'll see that we have taken that learning and we've asked the question, how can the commission interpret these calls for actions into movement in the next 170 days of our work? So in doing that tonight, we're going to review our process to date as well as the approach on how we will operationalize these calls to action going forward. We do not want to wait until September 15th to have a report and calls to action. We have from the very beginning began issuing calls when they were appropriate and when they were needed and begun to move action, and some of those things you will see tonight have in fact yielded some movement, and we believe will yield movement going forward. We all have a commitment in this region to not let each other down, to together come around the changes that need to be made in order for our region to address the very serious and deeply seated issues that have led to the formation of this commission and led to the kind of concern that you've reflected by being here tonight. So tonight is about these pathways. We're going to follow a bit of our pattern with public comment and with our polling process, and then we'll be moving to our working group report outs. We will take a break after the initial reports from the working groups are on the table to see if there are questions from the audience at that stage, in addition to the time for public comment. So we're going to move now to our audience polling, and Monique, I believe you're going to do that, so welcome our Assistant Director, Monique Thomas.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, great. So we are going to, as it's our practice, our tradition, do a little bit of audience polling. Does everyone have a keypad? Yeah? Raise your hand if you do not have a keypad. Somebody will get that to you, Angela. Perfect. So tonight we have 8 questions and 1 practice question. Who hasn't actually used one of these keypads before? Okay, that's fine. It's fairly easy. And so we'll ask you a question, and you'll notice, actually, look at your keypad now. You'll see 10 letters. Excuse me? 10 letters and 10 numbers. And so we'll ask a question, and one of the answer choices will correspond with either the letter or the number, and you pick the best one. So if you change your mind during the process, we'll save the last one. So if you enter one and change your mind, the last one will be saved. And there'll be a time frame that I'll call out, okay? So pretty basic. So we'll start with demographic questions, and then we'll go into our topical considerations. We'll do a little bit of a repeat from last time for validity. So we'll start with the practice question if we're ready. And there are a couple of new arrivals, so if we can get them keypads if they haven't had one. Okay, so we'll start with this. And you'll notice on the top, I guess it was my right, I guess yours as well, you'll see polling closed and it's red. It's harder to see. And so when polling is closed, you can enter answers and it won't be locked. When polling is open, it'll be green, indicating it's safe to save. And then when it closes, it'll close. And so they'll no longer be saved, okay? So we'll start with this. What is your favorite color? Please note this is a practice question. So no pressure, right? So what is your favorite color? I'll read the answer choices. A, black, B, brown, C, blue, D, green, E, orange, F, purple, G, red, H, yellow, I, white, J, other, okay? If you tried to enter it just now, you weren't paying attention because the polling is closed, but polling is open now, so you can enter your choice. The bottom right-hand corner, you see how many seconds you have left? About 10 seconds left. Oh, thank you. Is that better? All right, polling is now closed. It's about 34% chose blue as their favorite color, okay? So pretty simple. It's been consistently blue, so I think that's generally, it's not the best sample perhaps, but it looks like generally Ferguson Commission attendees like blue. All right, so you ready to start? Okay, so polling is closed, but in what geographic area is your primary home or residence located? A, St. Louis City, B, St. Louis County, C, St. Charles County, D, Jefferson County, E, Franklin County, F, St. Clair County, Illinois, G, Madison County, H, Monroe County, and I is other. Polling is now open. About 10 seconds left. All right. And so half of you are from St. Louis City. You reside, and then about 4 out of 10, St. Louis County. A little bit of representation from St. Clair County. We see you. Okay, great. Next question. In what geographic area is your primary work and or school? Now, if you're retired, you can note other. A, St. Louis City, B, St. Louis County, C, St. Charles County, D, Jefferson County, E, Franklin County, F, St. Clair County, G, Madison County, H, Monroe County, and I is other. Polling is now open. Less than 10 seconds. Okay, again, about 4 out of 10, the city, 37% the county, and then we have a significant amount of other, 20%. Next question. With which gender do you identify? Select one. A, female, B, male, C, other, and D is decline. Polling is open. About 10 seconds left, nearly. Okay, it's closed now. About 52 representing male. That's a flip from the last meeting. Okay. Next question. How would you describe your ethnicity or race? A, white, B, black or African American, C, Hispanic, Latino or Spanish origin, D, Asian, E, American Indian or Alaskan Native, F, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, G, other, and H is decline. Polling is now open. About 10 seconds left. Okay. 65% white in the room, 25 have identified as African American, 4 American Indian or Alaskan Native, and then 4% of you declined. Okay, so this is the age question. We like to tell you that it's self-reported and we can't see. It's a safe spot, okay? All right, in what age group do you belong? Select one. A, 21 and under. B, between 22 and 24. C, 35 and 44. D, 45 to 54. E, 55 to 64. F, 65 and over. And then G is decline. Polling is open. About 10 seconds left. About 6 seconds left. You can press decline if you'd like to decline. Okay. All right. So we have 35% are between 55 and 64, 27, 65 and over. Okay. This is the 10th meeting of the Ferguson Commission. How many previous meetings have you attended? I would note here that we're talking about the full Ferguson Commission meeting and not including the working group meetings. Okay, so this is the 10th one. So if it's your first meeting, you would say A, none. Okay, okay. B, between 1 to 2. C, 3 to 4. D, 5 to 6. E, 7 to 8. And F is 9, so you've been to all of them, okay? Polling is open. About 10 seconds left. Okay, so most of you, welcome. It's your first time. 55% is your first time. And then we have about small 2%, but you've been to all of them. Welcome back. All right, let's go to the next one. So now we're going into topical considerations. If you've been to the last meeting, you know that this is a question that we're repeating for just making sure that we have the right data, okay? So what 3 issues have the greatest impact on our community's health and well-being? This sets us up for the topic at the next meeting, May 11th, okay? A, insurance coverage. B, ability to pay for health services. C, environmental hazards like air pollution. D, neighborhood safety. E, distance to the healthcare provider. F, ability to understand and use health information. G, access to fresh fruits and vegetables. H, stress. I, healthcare that is sensitive to cultural differences. And so you're picking 3 here, okay? Polling is open. Yes. That's A, insurance coverage. B, ability to pay for health services, environmental hazards. Can everyone see? No, we may have to re-poll. Let me just check to see if that's an option. I'm gonna have to say if that is indicated. Looks like we have had, got it? All right. So I'm going to read it aloud again. That way everyone can see because people may be struggling in the back, okay? So again, you're picking 3. Polling is closed right now, but we have what 3 issues have the greatest impact on our community's health and well-being. So A is insurance coverage. B, ability to pay for health services. C, environmental hazards like air pollution. D, neighborhood safety. E, distance to the healthcare provider. F, ability to understand and use health information. G, access to fresh fruits and vegetables. H, stress. Oh. Okay, okay.
There are only 10.
Only 10 responses.
If you finish reading them, and then you re-poll. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. So H was stress, and I, healthcare that is sensitive to cultural differences. Does everyone at least have their 3 locked in their mind? So you'll be ready to go? Okay. Let's try this again. Thank you for your patience. It's open now. Okay. What 3 issues have the greatest impact on our community's health and well-being? A, insurance coverage. B, ability to pay for health services. C, environmental hazards. D, neighborhood safety. E, distance to healthcare provider. F, ability to understand and use health information. G, access to fresh fruits and vegetables. H, stress. I, healthcare that's sensitive to cultural differences. All right, we have some lockdown. Let's just name the top. So it looks like ability to pay for health services is top, followed by neighborhood safety, followed by stress, which is consistent with our last polling. Okay. Next question, also on health, but a different way. Same, enter 3. So we'll wait to make sure you have your 3 locked down before we go live from the polling. What 3 issues have the greatest impact on our community's ability to access healthcare services? Okay. A, having health insurance. B, cost of healthcare. C, transportation. D, finding a provider or doctor that will see you. E, understanding how to find your way through the healthcare system. F, limited hours of clinics or doctors. G, being able to get time off from work. H, long wait before seeing the doctor. Now, does anyone not have their 3 in their head already? Okay, polling is open. What 3 issues have the greatest impact on our community's ability to access healthcare services? About 10 seconds left. Looks like people have entered. All right. Okay. Great. So top seems to be the cost of healthcare, followed by understanding how to find your way through the healthcare system, and then, having health insurance is 2, closely followed with understanding how to find your way through the healthcare system. All right. That concludes our polling portion. At this time, to Bethany Johnson-Javois, Managing Director. Oh, also, I'll note that we are going to immediately collect these. Raise your hand if you have one. Now hold them up. This does nothing but operate this, so we kindly ask you to return them. We'll be immediately collecting them, okay? You can't talk, you can't, what do we say? Can't open your, what do we say? Garage door. So please, and you can tell on your neighbor, all right? Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to take that poll. People are coming around. Please hold yours up high if no one has collected your voter to date. Just want to make mention as well that we do have a time for open mics, so if you have a burning comment or question, there is a fishbowl that is available for you to make comment, so you can do that as well at this time.
Do you have the cumulative demographic data from all your meetings?
Yes.
Is that published or available?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. On the meeting, or actually on the reports tab, I think, meetings tab. Okay? Okay, without further ado, what I'm going to do is to review the breakout sessions and the reporting from the demographics last time at our commission meeting on April 13th. For commissioners, it's on your screen that's behind me, and for public audience, same presentation is here. So in our electronic polling the last time, 9 out of 10 attendees resided in either the St. Louis County or the city of St. Louis. 51% resided in St. Louis County. And 8 of 10 attendees worked or attended school in either St. Louis County or city as well, with 44% actually attending school in St. Louis County. Nearly 7 of 10 attendees last time were women, and we had a different demographic at this meeting. And of the age groups that attended, they were pretty equally split amongst a small number, with the majority, the 55 to 64 years of age. 6 out of 10 attendees at our last session were white attendees, which you can see here. And 3 of 10 attendees have participated in at least one other commission meeting. So we typically do draw new members to each meeting each time that we meet. And what we like to do now is to talk about the polling results from our last meeting. We wanted to include more voice into the considerations for health disparities. And so we polled you today. At the next meeting, you'll see your results as well. And from the last time, here is how people responded. Out of all of the categories, the top 3 were ability to pay for health services, neighborhood safety, and insurance coverage. So more than 5 of 10 feel health care access and neighborhood safety are the most critical issues impacting regional health and well-being. On the next question, the answers seem to be in that group: acquiring and paying for health care insurance are the greatest deterrents to health care cost. 74% of those that voted said cost of health care, 60% having health insurance, 46% maneuvering the healthcare system, very similar to today's responses. We had lively public discussion and open mic, and the small group discussions were focused around racial caucus groups. Say that 3 times fast. Racial caucus group. Yes. Okay, so public open mic comments really responding to racial equity and reconciliation. These were kind of the realms of comments. Dismantling racism at a systemic level is a first step. The second piece is position to offer resources to help. Fourth set of comments is a continuum is needed of efforts to train, to build awareness, and definitely a consistent theme of words is creating healing spaces throughout our region. And the fourth in public comment is to build community that is free of racial fear, beginning with talking with others and not through or over others. And then we summarized the public comment in the following way here above. There was an individual that came to talk basically about a reverse role play, society seeking the worst examples as representatives of the African American race, and should you not be in that race, there's not the same standard that is applied to you. The second is moving beyond a black and white discussion, although the data showed us in the votes that having a discussion about African Americans and whites is important. We also need to move beyond that as well, to have inclusive language to include additional communities in our region. And there was an expression from our public comment that there is solidarity increasing between Asian Americans and African Americans through 2 organizations in our region. The third is a call for civic engagement. And that, in fact, as you look at the commission's topics and how we represent our working groups, that same type of breakdown needs to happen as well within our national discussion and dialogue. The fourth was a critique of the Ferguson Commission's procurement process, of which we strongly agree. The RFP process for hiring, in fact, takes a lot of time, and the individual commented about the scrutiny that's needed and the time frame that is needed with a governmental entity to be able to effectively select the staff and support that is needed. And for that reason, that individual said that it, in fact, does compromise the effectiveness of the commission's work, especially as you hear Rich's call to say that we have a bent toward urgency and action. And the last one was a comment that we heard. Actually, Keith is in the room, so hopefully we made your comment well here, that erosion of trust does exist. but there needs to be mended fences between community and police officers. Keith's comment specifically was around the fact that there's a unique nature in police officers, that many volunteer for this job. Initially, officers run toward bullets on behalf of the community, and yet there is a brokenness in the relationship that we need to definitely begin to mend and rebuild and cause increased accountability. Keith, did we get that pretty much right? All right, see? Working hard. So here, the racial caucus groups broke out. We had a lot of discussion about the rationale, but we did something different with the commission. Typically, we break up depending on smaller groups, depending on how you self-select. But this time, we thought it was important that we focus in caucus groups of like color. Data does show that there's a safety and there's an ability to express things you wouldn't necessarily express if not amongst your own. And so we did this as an experiment, and here is what we learned. Since you're in the back, I'm going to read this a little bit to you. Racial caucus groups from people of color, this was the discussion that was had. The question on the table was, what do you need in order to continue the reflection of the conversation after our presentation? And these are the needs. I need white people to listen without explaining away the things I share with them. I need black men to talk with each other and not just at each other. I need youth to stop ignoring the problems in our community. I need people of color beyond African Americans to get more involved in making things better. I need darker-skinned people to stop thinking that lighter-skinned people think they are better than them. I need black people to focus on the systems that are oppressing them and stop marching on other black folk. I need white people to stop thinking they have arrived because they have one black friend. Okay. I need for all of us to put ourselves in more uncomfortable spaces so that we can have real conversation about these issues, and I need for us to do less self-censoring. So that was the feedback from the people of color breakout. And then this is the feedback from white people who were in the group with the same question. What do you need in order to continue the reflection of our conversation? And here were the needs that we identified. I need to know about opportunities for open dialogue, and I need it to be consistent and regular. I need structures to support connections across social diversity. I need to be reminded of specific, personal, and concrete examples of white privilege. I need cross-racial conversations across all ages. I need to know what language to use and ways to recognize cultural competency. I need accessibility for those who don't self-select to come to Ferguson Commission meetings. I need to identify nodes of hatred and challenge them. I need the courage to take risk, to initiate conversations where I am right now. 2 more, I need to put myself in places to meet others. And finally, I need these conversations to be a part of fun community building. So with that, we want to thank all of you that provided feedback on last week, and that concludes the summary for our 413 breakout session. At this time, Ms. Jerica Franks is coming to open us up for our public open mic portion of tonight's meeting. Thank you, Jerica.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. As Bethany has mentioned, this is the general public open mic session, so this is an opportunity for you to share with us your opinions, suggestions, comments, questions that you may have for the commission. I will do a drawing. I do ask that as you approach the stand that you give us your name and also slowly spell it out as we do document everything that is said. So again, if we ever have to reference back to who said it, we can correctly acknowledge who is speaking with us today, okay? And you will also have 3 minutes, okay? I will be keeping time, 3 minutes. First, we will start with Van Smith. Van Smith. If you... Okay. Well, welcome, thank you. Reverend Mark Harvey. After Reverend Harvey, we will have Ronald Stamps. And after Ronald Stamps, we will have Alex Cuenca. Please forgive me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly.
Hi, I want to welcome you to Carondelet. I'm a United Methodist pastor here in this neighborhood, and this is a neighborhood which has long had a commitment to support, particularly of the police department. And we've had a lot of confusion in this neighborhood through the course of the Ferguson events, as the Southside Safety Group has met right here in this room with 100 to 150 people on a monthly basis with representatives from the police department seeking to communicate, build strong cooperation between neighbors, as we've participated in the Next Door communication, social networking, and so forth, as the neighborhood to the near north of us has increasingly become the highest crime neighborhood in the whole metropolitan area. And I don't know if you're aware of that shift. Part of that has been demographic by nature, but not entirely, we know, of course. And so I think this is a neighborhood that has responded greatly to the issues which you are addressing. I want to thank you all on the commission for choosing to come here. Thank you. I think that we have 50% of the people here tonight new. I see some familiar faces of people who've come from Carondelet here, and I think that's very encouraging. As somebody who personally has worked in racial diversity issues all of my life, I've served as a pastor, predominantly African-American congregations previously, here in a neighborhood which is historically predominantly Caucasian, but that has shifted. We're now about 40% African American. A lot of people have stereotypical perceptions of Southside St. Louis, which simply are not true. We've gone through all of that kind of change, which so many communities have gone through in terms of ethnic diversity. Also, the highest Muslim, area in the metropolitan area here in the South Side. So we've worked on those issues. We're working to support the police. And we are just only now, a little late to the table, beginning to move into issues of discussing ethnic diversity and racial polarization. But I think our police department, all things considered in District 1, have done a very good job on working on those issues because they've been highly responsive to the neighbors for a long time. So I just wanted to say all that. Thank you. Mark Harvey, M-A-R-K, H-A-R-V-E-Y, Reverend. When I put my name in the thing, they said, well, you may want to say something. I said, I'm a pastor. I'll probably say too much.
Thank you, Reverend Harvey. Ronald Stamps. And then after Ronald Stamps, Alex Cuenca. Cuenca, please forgive me again.
My name is Ronald Stamps, and spelled R-O-N-A-L-D-S-T-A-M-P-S. And I would like to say, I think it's unfair that for so many years that the police have been able to get away with so many things, so much immunity. Everybody in this room probably is accountable for their actions, but the police have done so many things, devious things, and they've not been held accountable. Until they are held accountable, then that would be the biggest solving of the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Stamps. And then after Alex, we will have Linda, please forgive me, Lafreniere. Linda. After Alex, and then after Miss Linda, we'll have Ricky Jackson.
Hi, my name is Alex Cuenca. I'm a professor of education at St. Louis University. And what I'm here for is I wanted to urge the commission to think about, in terms of education, critical urban education reform. We've had a long history of urban reform in the United States. We've had a long history, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. We have a long history of education reform in the United States. David Tyke is a historian who talks about this one best system that we're always constantly searching for. We're always looking for this one particular system. And what we fail to often talk about are place-based strategies that we need to empower communities. And I hope that the commission takes that to heart. I hope that they find ways to leverage education in ways that deconcentrate disadvantage. That we stop with a merging of school districts and we keep concentrating poverty in the same kinds of areas. That you're doing something more than the same playbook that we've been using in education over and over again. That you help us rethink the strategies of testing and punishing and try to accentuate the civic capacities of students, because that's what we need. We need to look at freedom schools. We need to look at that example that they set for those communities, and to really empower our communities. And so that's all I was here for, just to urge the commission to be more critically minded about the urban reform, to not use the same strategies over and over again that we've done, something more place-based, something more empowering, something more specifically tailored to the communities, and that we redefine success in ways that are more political and not just mathematics and science, but more civic. So that's all I've got to say. Sure. Alex, and the last name is C-U-E, N as in Nancy, C-A. Freedom schools are operated in the South, and they were concentrated in African American communities who taught African Americans. So it was African American communities that were teaching African American children. And so those, to me, are the examples of what we need. We need more teachers from the communities. We need to create pipelines. We need to push education, higher education, myself included, St. Louis University, to create pipelines between communities and schools so that we can return teachers back to communities and empower those communities from the people that are from those communities. So that's what I hope, that these are the kinds of reforms that we're looking at, that they're outside the box, not just merely rethinking the MSIP-5 formula, or just doing the same thing that we've always been doing, but something more strategic, something more critical, something that's just different.
And Linda Lafayette. And after Linda again, it's Ricky Jackson. Please also spell your name out for our transcriptionists. We definitely want to make sure we acknowledge all of your comments and suggestions.
Hi, my name is Linda Lafayette, and that's spelled L-A-F as in Frank, E-R-R-I-E-R-E. And what I'd like to speak about is I'd like to bring together two of the focus groups and address child well-being as well as law enforcement community relationships. What I would like to propose, and this is way out of my comfort zone to stand here and talk in a mic, so forgive me if I lose my train of thought, but I would like to suggest a police education and, what is it called? Training kind of strategy that where the police would first be working in community service roles like the DARE officer in schools. Before they're ever out on working a beat and facing more dangerous situations. By doing this, they would be building relationships with the community that they will be later serving. And I think that with stronger relationships, we have a better chance of fair policing. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And after Ricky Jackson, go ahead. After Ricky Jackson, we will have Dan Hyatt. And after Dan Hyatt, we will have Jim Roos. Roos? Together? Sure. Yes, please spell out your name and identify each of yourselves.
My name is Ricky Jackson, R-I-C-K-Y, and J-C-K-S-O-N. It's always scary that you get up here and misspell your own name. But Jim has a whole lot to say. I have very little to say. But I do want to say this. As I drove in, I made this up on the way in. I said, the police should protect and serve. Ever heard that before? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the police should live up to their mantra of protecting and serving. Really, they need to get back to that very simple service mantra, protecting and serving. And that's what I have to say about that.
My name is Jim Roos, R-O-O-S. Ricky and I work for housing organizations called Neighborhood Enterprises and Sanctuary in the Ordinary. I think it was in March, the Riverfront Times did an article about the Arch City Defenders. They were aware of what was going on with the municipal courts long before Ferguson became a common name. Neighborhood Enterprises and Sanctuary in the Ordinary are not-for-profit corporation, have worked at providing decent affordable housing since 1971. The recommendations that we have to the Ferguson Commission are in literature that Ricky brought and that I brought, and we'd like you to get a copy of that before you leave. The basic thought that we're recommending structure is in the banner that we put on the wall out in the hallway. I've been invited not to speak, not to present, but to come to the Economic Inequality and Opportunity Committee meeting on the 6th of May. We've been invited to come to that. So we'll say more about our housing strategy at that time. Thank you again for considering our ideas.
Thank you so much. Dan Hyatt.
Hi, I'm Dan Hyatt, Hyatt. I've been since I moved to Missouri 5 years ago, I quickly became an activist against North County justice and against the ticket revenue machine in North County and the complete lack of due process in the courts. In Jeff City for Senate Bill 5, I listened to the mayors explain how they've not heard anything. It's still business as usual. Former Chief Fitch gets up there and says, don't let the mayors tell you that this is about safety. It's not about safety, it's about revenue. And then he goes into his extensive information about how it's about revenue. The mayors get up there and said, we're doing good things. So at my work, I ask many, many black women from North County, does your municipality do good things? And they look at me and they say, no, these are professional black women. Then I ask them, would any of your neighbors say your municipality does good things? And they laugh and they say, hell no, or just no way, or something like that. Also, I've noticed in the courts, the Municipal Court League, which is not a government organization and has no sanction under the state law, is basically trying to reform themselves. They wouldn't do this before, even though they have a legal obligation under Rule 2 to report corruption and misconduct by other judges. But now that they're under pressure and they might lose all their courts, now they're saying, well, let us reform our own house. And I say, if they couldn't be trusted before, can we trust them now? I say, no, we need drastic change in the municipal court. With the police and the city councils, it's been a collusion, it's been a conspiracy, it violates state law, it violates tax law because, as Chief Fitch pointed out, many of the municipalities have in their budget, hey, we're gonna increase ticket revenue 15% next year. That's actually an illegal tax increase under the Hancock Amendment because, as Chief Fitch said, either the mayors are clairvoyant or they're writing revenue tickets. And lastly, I live on the cusp of North County, and we've noticed that the police in North County have gotten crazy and scary, and such as myself on December 28th, I was pulled over by a St. Anne police officer. I had 2 officers behind my car waiting for the signal to shoot. They're standing there, they were driving up the wrong way on the off-ramp. My crime was that my front license plate had fallen off on I-7, well, prior, but I was on I-70. And instead of endangering the motorist public by pulling over on the freeway in St. Anne, I signaled the officer, letting him know that I was pulling over, and I pulled over on the off-ramp as I'd always been trained by California Highway Patrol and other agencies. And this officer became enraged, he was a bully, and he was out of control. And I hope I made sense. Thank you very much.
We have time for 2 more. We're going to have Forrest Miller, and after Forrest Miller, Sierra Frazier. Again, please state your name and spell it out for me. 2 minutes.
My name is Forrest, Forrest. Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R. My concern is the declining economy in our region. I have been visiting many cities in the Midwest my whole career, and I have seen cities like Indianapolis and Nashville and Louisville, Atlanta for sure, just absolutely pass us by. When I was a youngster, I lived down the street here on South Grand. I went to Cleveland High School. The public school system was probably one of the best in the country at the time. All the north, south, east, west schools were good. Soldan was good. Beaumont was good. The schools of Riverview were good. Normandy was good. Everything was good. That's all changed. I'm also concerned that we don't think we're in competition with anybody else. We think we can do what we've always done and get away with it. That's not what the people in Indianapolis are doing. That's not what the people in Dallas are doing. That's not what the people in any other city that we compete with are doing. We are lazy. We have to look at what they're doing and do some of those things. I also think that we need to all sit down and make a new city and change these inequities and change the school system where we have schools that pay $20,000 for a student and we have the next school district pays $6,000. That isn't fair. We will not attract businesses to this community when we have school districts that people can't afford to live in, and we have other school districts where they can't get a good education in. So I think the economy of this city needs to be reinvented. I think we need one police department like these other cities do. We don't have to have, you know, however many we have. I know one instance down here in Lakeshire, the Lakeshire Police, they patrol one lane of Highway 21, which is Tesson Ferry Road. And the rest is patrolled by St. Louis County. So they're given tickets on one lane of the street. And am I done? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
I got here first to sign up for speaking, and Terry was wondering, could I just have a few minutes, maybe Grace one more, if you would go?
If the commission, yes. Let Sierra speak first. I'm sorry. If you don't mind, Sierra speaking first, and then I'll just have you speak right after her. And if you could also pronounce your name and spell.
My name is Crystal Washington, C-R-Y-S-T-A-L, Washington, W-A-S-H-I-N-G-T-O-N. I put my alias down, Sierra Frazier, because I'm paranoid. And, you know, people are always trying to shut me up. So, okay. But I just want to say I've been a teacher for 15 years. And I've been knowing there was a problem ever since 20-something years ago. I went to a 0 hour to try to graduate on time because I had a baby my senior year. I was kicked out of school a lot for fighting out at Pettenville. And when I went into Vashon, it was like, oh my God, this is school? Like, what the? And I just don't understand why people want to attack the test as if these kids, when they fill out an application, it's not a test. They have to read the question. They have to answer, just like on a standardized test. They have to read shorts. They have to synthesize information. Okay, that's just to get an application. If they want to go to school to be a lawyer or something, you know, what are we going to do then? What are we going to say about what's the name of the law test you got to take? I forgot. The bar, or, you know, the teacher test, the praxis, just the fireman test. You know, this is ridiculous to sit up here and argue that the reason why these schools are failing is because to put this information out here about this, they get so much money here, they get so much money there, but not include the federal money that they get. You know what I'm saying? Just try to make the information, because people who have jobs want to keep their jobs. Okay, so, you know, this whole Ferguson situation is because of education. These kids out here, they need to be on the Ferguson Commission. They need to be able to read that information you all have in front of your name, in front of your, you know, your hands or whatever. They need to be able to read it and comprehend it and create solutions. I could care less about a community school. I care about these kids, okay? Anytime you have a school and the whole school is poverty-stricken, nothing's gonna come out of that. We need integration. I don't understand why everybody's so afraid to be with the opposite race. I mean, me being in a room full of white people not gonna make me less black. I'm still gonna be black. It don't matter. You know, people are afraid to be around white people. We gotta stay separate and all this. That's just craziness to me. You know, why? Why would you want to be separate? We sit up here and say people are people, but everybody's saying we want to be separate. We need black schools. You know, we need black this and black that. I believe we need integration, and we need to like have apple, oranges, all in the same basket. I mean, yeah, we need black teachers, but all of us need to be with the people who've been getting educated for thousands of years, not since slavery 150 years ago. Okay, so that's just the bottom line right there. And as for solutions, but I don't understand in the age of technology, why are we still pulling people over to get them tickets for a tail light? Can't you put something in the internet and zoom and it go today and send them a bill, or if they don't pay the bill, tax them? You know, less government, okay? Less government, and let our kids be able to be a part of that government via education.
And if you could please announce yourself and also spell.
I'm here on behalf of the Avis Grace Foundation. We actually provide scholarships to children of the incarcerated, okay? This year, we will give at least 2 scholarships to black males, targeted to black males on the north side. I just moved back to St. Louis after being gone for 15 years. In the last 2 months, I've spent up at McClure High, U City High, and other places interviewing the young black men, very bluntly, who might just as easily have been Michael Brown. Now, it is easier to describe a problem. By the way, I'm here because my board has wanted me to go to a number of these meetings because we got invited by the Atlanta people that contributed the money for these scholarships we're giving this year on the north side, and said, design us a program. We want to impact what's going on in St. Louis on the north side. And we looked around, they found Avis Grace, we like what you do. Now you tell us what we can do, because this fellow says, I think I can raise $1 million. But you tell us how you impact the north side. So I've been studying what you folks are doing, and the reason I do that is because my background is cultural anthropology. And for 48 years, I've been designing change projects. Yves and I became an attorney and practiced in St. Louis for many years. And we all know this: it is always easier to describe a problem than to figure out how to change it. Well, for 15 years, I've lived down in near Eglin Air Force Base in a neighborhood filled with military folks. Colonels, more colonels than you can shake a stick at. Generals, everywhere. General Petraeus took a number of people from the Ranger camp down there and used them over in Iraq and Afghanistan. The interesting thing is that Petraeus required his people, am I over? Okay, a few more minutes, to read 5 books before they would join his command, okay? 3 of those books had to do with Muslims and a lot of the other things, but 2 of the books were very interesting. One was T.E. Lawrence's 7 Pillars of Wisdom. Now, we've all seen the movie, Lawrence of Arabia, right? How many of you ever read the book? Today, right now, the 7 Pillars of Wisdom is the handbook for insurgency. Count on the fact that ISIS has read it. Count on the fact that the U.S. troops over there are using it to understand what's going on in that part of the world. The other book that Petraeus required his troop to read was Kim, the book by Rudyard Kipling. about the young boy who became a spy because it described the tribal relationships so well. So what I wanted to do is give you folks, because I looked at all your website, I looked at all the documents on there, what you were dealing with. Here's the 5 books.
Can you do it in the next 30 seconds?
Ghetto-cide. Have you read that? If you haven't heard of it, need to read it. A book that just came out, Diversity Explosion, How the New Racial Demographics Are Reshaping America. That speaks directly to Ferguson, because there's 60 black males for every 100 females in Ferguson, as the book cited in the New York Times article on it just this last weekend. Well, I can't, so I'll just quit right now, but the one book you folks have to look at, because of the process of change. Ward Hunt Goodenough wrote the book back in 1963, Cooperation and Change. If you're serious about designing something that will just change something, that is still the textbook on how you actually implement the process of change. If you haven't read it, your staff needs to read it, and they need to have read it yesterday.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for your comments and suggestions. Again, we do have note of this on our websites as well, so if you ever need to follow up on anything or if you missed any information, definitely do that. I will now have Bethany speak with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jerica. This portion of the meeting agenda is focused on our working group updates and proposed next steps. So what you will see for the audience, you will see here a teed up presentation, and for commissioners, the identical presentation is here for your viewing, is updates from Citizen Law Enforcement Relations, who will have 5 minutes, Municipal Courts and Governance Working Group, who will have 5 minutes, Economic Inequity and Opportunity will report out tonight as well, and finally, Child Wellbeing and Education Equity will report out. So in that order, if Commissioners Isom and Packnett will please join me here at the podium, we will begin with our update from Citizen Law Enforcement Relations.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. So we will, to my understanding, be providing a more detailed information in a bit. But the very quick update for us is that we are trying to achieve change that includes accountability in policies and that enable law enforcement agencies to serve and protect, to a comment that was made earlier, all citizens. And that system of accountability is based on trust, mutual respect, transparency, cultural competence, and responsiveness and justice.
So the priorities that the Ferguson Commission voted on and that the working group is working on are use of force, and we will talk a little bit about that today in terms of training, civilian oversight, anti-bias and cultural competency, accreditation, accountability, and community policing, responses to mass demonstrations, and special prosecution of specifically officer-involved shootings, and then officer wellness, which we will also talk about later on today. So those are the priority areas that we will be working on in the future, and we will have more information on 3 of those areas in terms of training when we come back up.
The working group on municipal courts has been active. We have another meeting tomorrow at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. One thing I would state is that if you look at the values that are governing our operations, we're focusing on just governance as manifested by court operations, focusing on restorative justice, judicial independence, fiscal responsibility, and transparency. I'd call your attention to the tactical approaches. One thing that we think is very important is to have a uniform list of rights so that individuals who appear before municipal courts understand, number one, court procedures, and number two, what their rights are as they appear before a judge. We believe in addressing failure to appear charges, looking at ability to pay, and alternatives to jail time, which involves establishing alternative community service. Now, one thing we might say, you gave me all of this stuff about Senate Bill 5, so I'm going to take a little more. I've been given a little more than 5 minutes. One thing to think about is that things continue to move in Jefferson City. Senate Bill 5 was passed a few weeks ago. The House passed a substitute for Senate Bill 5, which is somewhat consistent with Senate Bill 5. And I just want to mention a couple of the elements that are included in the House substitute. And many of these are also included in Senate Bill 5. One thing that we had called in our working group, we had called for enforcing caps on traffic fines. Both Senate Bill 5 and the House substitute do provide for enforcing traffic caps on revenues generated from traffic stops. The Senate bill capped it at 10%. The House substitute caps it at 20% for outstate Missouri and 15% for in-state in St. Louis County. There's a difference in that. We're not exactly sure what's going to happen as those two bills move forward through the various committees. Another thing is that we have called for alternatives to failure to appear. We want to prohibit warrants for arrests for individuals simply who fail to appear. Prohibit confinement for individuals simply because they don't have the money to pay for a fine. Those provisions are also included in the House substitute and in Senate Bill number 5. We had also called for allowing defendants to present evidence about their financial condition before fines are assessed, and this allows a system to be developed for alternative community service. We believe that's really important, and that provision is also included. We have also called for creating a list of procedural rights in all municipal courts, and those procedural elements are included in the House substitute for Senate Bill 5. One thing we might also add is that House Bill 5 has been amended somewhat to include some new provisions that were not initially included in Senate Bill 5. And some of these amendments deal with municipal accountability. It requires municipalities to have a balanced budget. It requires municipalities to have an annual audit and to report those audits. It requires municipalities to retain adequate insurance. It requires municipalities to provide written policies on the safe operation of emergency vehicles. So what we're saying is that the House substitute bill would impose a whole series of requirements on municipalities to be what we might call, and this is not an appropriate word, but analogous to a certified municipality, that they can in fact provide municipal services and that they do have a revenue base in which to provide those services. One of the issues that's happened is that, and I think it's been alluded to earlier this evening, is a number of municipalities have relied upon traffic fines as a source of revenue. And as they rely on sources of revenue, they do that because they can't provide regular services. We're saying under the provisions of this bill that would require the municipalities to begin to address that and report that out to the state. One thing also that House Bill 5, the substitute, does is that if a municipality does not comply, if a municipality is in violation, then there can be an election to disincorporate the municipality. So there's a lot of provisions here. Now I would caution us to stop and understand that we don't know exactly what's going to happen as the House substitute and the Senate Bill 5 are worked out in the various committees that are involved in Jefferson City. But we can say that there are significant changes, and many of these changes that are incorporated, in fact a significant number, have been those that have been recommended by the working group on municipal courts and governance. So I would encourage you to stay involved, to stay informed, and to watch what happens in Jefferson City, because we really don't know what the ultimate outcome is going to be, but progress is being made, change is in the forefront.
We'll have time for questions at the end of all of it, so hold on to it and we'll come right back.
Thanks. What we have is not low-hanging fruit. This is a very broad and challenging category to find changes to change this region's economic inequity and give opportunities for the underserved. What we really want to do is achieve economic opportunity and economic mobility, which is defined as one generation after another moving up in the economic cycle. So we're addressing family and community stability, institutions and organizations, and systemic policies and practices. We've taken this challenge and carved it up into 7 different pieces, and that's what we're addressing in our work groups. We've only had 2 work groups so far, but we have another one, I believe, next week. So we've carved it up into job skills and training, employment and income, transportation, housing, entrepreneurship and small business growth, health and wellness, and youth investment. So we have some pretty broad challenges that we have to take on here.
Thank you, Pat. And although we've only met twice, we've actually gotten a lot of good work done. And so in order to do justice to this work, we're putting forth our best effort in doing our due diligence, which requires quite a bit of research and gathering information, looking at next practices, best practices nationally, so that when we come back to the commission with recommendations, and they should anticipate that we will have calls of action at our next commission meeting around a lot of the research that we've already done. And so at our second working group meeting, we had a presentation from Dr. Keon Gilbert. And in his presentation, we focused on social welfare policies and practices and what those disparate impacts have been in our community and how it's impacted family and community stability, which is the first area, the first layer of the work that we're looking at. So the research shows, one of the striking things that we learned was that the research shows that the benefit of education as it relates to life expectancy for African American males stops at 12 years of school as it relates to life expectancy. And so we thought, 12, what does that mean, 12 years? You have to look at the research, and when you get in there, what we find is directly related to the report that came out today, talking about the gender unbalance in the city of Ferguson and how pronounced it is. So the research says that institutions of education are perceived by boys when they get to a certain age of being highly feminine. So they're not relating to them. We're not educating our boys into young adulthood, adolescence and young adulthood in a manner that is useful and helpful to them. And so it's very important, if we're going to look at ways to provide economic mobility with increased access to financial assets and housing, transportation, job skills, and entrepreneurial, so they can get on the track with the priorities we have in our region, that we understand what we're missing. So that was one of the things that was very important. The studies also highlighted the unintended impact of child support policies as it impacts impoverished and poor communities, so we have to look at that. Another thing we talked about and learned was in-service provision. We are not only segregated racially and socioeconomically in our community, but we have great divides and segregation when it comes to service provision. So we need to look at a model to encourage collaboration and cooperation across industry sectors. So whether that's healthcare, education, jobs and employment, we've got a lot of things going on, but people just aren't collaborating. So we're wasting both time and money, and we're not getting the greatest impact, and certainly isn't efficient. So On May 6th, we're having our next working group meeting. The next working group meeting will focus on housing. It will be at Friendly Temple Missionary Baptist Church. That's 5515 Martin Luther King. So we invite you to join us there. And on May 20th, we'll be tackling the issue of transportation, site to be determined, but we invite you to join us there. And I would like for the commissioners to know that we will be bringing a call of action for affirmation to our working group and then back to the commission around child development accounts.
For this final section of the working group updates, I'm representing the co-chairs, Dr. Grayling Tobias and Ms. Becky James Hatter, who aren't able to be with us tonight, but offered the following for a report out to commissioners and to the community. And Reverend Starsky Wilson, we thank you for joining at this time as well. Perfect timing, it's okay. So here, the working group update for child well-being and education equity, the desired outcome. Very similar to the work that we do in economic inequity, it is a basket of breath within this one working group. So we have actually two desired changes that are defined by the working group. One in child well-being is a region that ensures that all children is defined here as 0 to 25, are thriving in their daily lives. And there's 3 sub-bullets of what that means for this working group and for our community, the way that the community is defining it. Growing and developing to their full potential, retaining the ability to be children, and preparing to become fully fulfilled and contributing adults. As defined by education equity here, the desired change is securing educational achievement, fairness, and opportunity for youth. And there are specific ways to do so. 1, setting high expectations. 2, recognizing unique differences and developmental stages. 3, to advance outcome-based approaches. 4, aligning and coordinating customized services. And 5, producing college-ready and career-ready students. So to get to this desired change, on the next slide, there's very tactical areas of approach that this working group has identified and prioritized for their work coming through the summer. Number 1, school district and school accreditation is a key area for their recommendation generation. 2nd, food and stability. 3rd, public education funding. 4th, college access and affordability is a critical area. 5th, human capital in education. 6th, social service coordination with schools. 7th is caring adults, as defined by our community, mentors, coaches, and others. Early childhood education, parent education and engagement, and childhood health. So at this time, in terms of our process, these have been the working group updates. And first, we're going to allow for commissioners to ask questions, and then ask the community if they have additional questions on our updates. I'll turn this over to Rich at this time.
Okay, so why don't we see, first of all, if there are questions from the audience here on any of the working group updates. We'll see if any of the commissioners have questions, and then we'll turn to a couple of cross-cutting action recommendations. Mr. Hyatt.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a microphone that we can just hand around? Here. Just stay where you are, and we'll just pass them. This is microphone 6, guys.
The question, I believe the underlying problem is the relationship of the municipal courts with the municipalities.
Something happened.
Was it something I said?
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah. They'll deal with it. Go ahead. Yeah.
On the municipal courts, I believe their relationship with the cities has created the whole crisis because they're so close to the cities that they don't supervise the city, they don't supervise the police because they're not independent. Was there anything on the municipal court workshop where they were going to address that, I call it nepotic relationship with the cities?
So, TR, there's a mic behind you. The question is, is the working group looking at the relationship between the municipal courts and the cities?
The answer is yes. We're looking at, we want to achieve a system where we believe a value is autonomy of the municipal courts within the governmental system, such that judges are not going to be taking directions from mayors and city council members to generate revenue. That's been a problem in the past, and that's a concern that we have. I know the House substitute bill deals with judicial appointments. It deals with the roles of judges and other legal officials in municipalities, so that is an issue of concern.
Good, thank you. A couple of questions back here.
Yes, I have two questions. One is, whatever happened to, I remember when I was young, you would, if you got a ticket and then you got pulled over again, you wouldn't get that same ticket again. You would show the police officer the ticket and they would give you time to. So I don't know if you guys included that or thought about that in your solutions. And then also, I didn't see anything to do with towing. I mean, I know if we stop locking people up for the warrants, then that would kill but the police officers, they are getting kickbacks from towing. Okay, we remember what happened to the chief that got fired or whatever. That's still going on. So we do all this and we don't include towing. The police still are gonna, when they pull you over, tow your car, and it's nothing you can do about it. So we really need to try to get somebody to amend and put something to do with towing in there. They need to quit towing people, poor people car. They don't have $200 or $300 to get their car out of tow.
So, two questions. One, the repeat offense, the duplicate ticketing, and the second on towing.
One thing we might say is the issue of duplicate ticketing is may be a product of the fact that we have 61 different police departments in St. Louis County. So there's no guarantee that if you get ticketed by one municipality, one police department, and you move into another municipality, that they will not ticket you for the same offense because it's a different police department. So that's one of the issues that we're trying to grapple with. When you have that many police departments and that many police departments that are, and that many municipalities that are sometimes seeking revenue from traffic tickets, that's an issue, and that's something that they're looking at and trying to find a mechanism to resolve. It's very complex, but we do hope to resolve that because it's not an appropriate. I believe that law enforcement traffic enforcement should be for public safety, not for revenue generation, and that's a value that we hope to instill. One thing I did not mention, probably because I couldn't read, it was too dark there, is that one of the amendments to the House substitute for Senate Bill 5 would require that municipalities to either employ or to contract with an accredited law enforcement agency. We have a lot of municipalities, a lot of municipal police departments that are not accredited, and some are accredited by CALEA, the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement. There are mechanisms which allow us to ensure the quality of law enforcement such that we're not trying to deal with generating revenue from traffic stops. The last thing that we need in a region is for people to be stopped and think that we're simply trying to get their money, not promote public safety.
Ms. Right. One thing, Ms. Washington, I think you raised two really good points from my limited understanding of the substitute for Senate Bill 5. One of the things we might do for tomorrow's working group meeting is we'll ask our research team to look at this duplicate ticketing question. I don't think the bill addresses it, but there are some limitations on fines and how much you can pile up a fine, and so it could be that that provision gets at that question. Towing, as far as I know, is still a remedy available to a municipality or a police department, and I think you raise a good point that needs to be put into the discussion. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
On the education equity part, on tactical approach, is there anywhere where you all are looking at school board members and how they are held accountable for what's happening in our schools, since they're, like for charter schools, we have no say as parents on who's on our board. They're not elected or anything, they're there, and when issues are brought to school boards, where's the accountability for the discipline that's happening in the schools and all the issues that are being brought to school boards? Is that going to be included in this tactical approach?
So Becky and Grayling aren't here, but Monique, perhaps you can help with this. The last working group meeting on child well-being and educational inequity, was there a discussion of governance? I know you had a human capital working group.
It was was one of our, it has been a discussion specifically about administration. And I know specifically we've been calling out SB 1 and HB 42, which kind of starts to address some of the governance issues. It's coming up the pipeline, but it hasn't been confirmed what we're going to be doing.
Okay, in the back, yes, ma'am. We'll have time for one more after this one, and then we'll see if commissioners have any questions before we move on.
So my question, or maybe it's more of a concern, is that in the education and equity arm, much of that has been tried before. And so similar to the municipal court reform, which really wouldn't have been, couldn't have dreamed it. We might have talked about it in a closed door, but it wasn't possible. I really urge the commission to look at things that are innovative, that haven't been done before, that don't concentrate poverty. Because many of these tactics that we've tried in our region, and they just haven't met our needs in terms of having a truly public and equitable education. So I would urge them to think big as we did with municipal court reform.
Yeah. Thank you. And Alex from SLU. Okay, one more over here. Mr. Jackson.
I just want to kind of piggyback on what she just said about being innovative. I think the silliness of 61 municipalities really needs to be looked at seriously. I mean, you're never going to get 61 municipalities to do anything but make money. That's true. But I really think, as a commission, I don't know how important you guys are, or how much impact a commission's going to make. But as a commission, if you say to whoever you're going to speak it to, let's get rid of all these municipalities, let's get one big city, let's get one policy about policing and about fairness, and all these other words you guys are using are great, but they're just words. You know, action is what's needed, and some serious, innovative stuff that hadn't been done before. St. Louis had never had one city, one big city, and it needs to be tried, in my opinion.
Thank you for those two comments and those two areas of encouragement. One quick comment, and then we'll see if there are questions from commissioners. The standards that Commissioner Carr mentioned that were added to the legislation and the revenue limitation on fines, it remains to be seen how far those get through the process and what impact they have on just the issue you raised, the question of consolidation and the number of municipalities. But it is a much more vigorous debate now than it was when the commission started work, and for that we're grateful, but still remains to be seen. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Questions from any commissioner for any of the working group chairs? Mr. Gore.
I have a question for you, Monique, since neither of the chairs from the education group are here. And I was just wondering whether in the educational working group meetings, whether there's been any discussion. I think a couple months ago, there was an article in the Post-Dispatch about the disparity. St. Louis was, I think, the #1 ranked school system in terms of the disparity, the racial disparity in school suspensions. And I was just wondering, is that something that's being addressed in the working group at all?
No, it's a great question, Commissioner Gore. And so the subgroup that manages that is the group that looks at social service coordination with schools. And so one of the working group members, Mr. Karan, he's the one that he kind of has been sponsoring that and pushing for that. So when we think about child well-being, and we talk about that piece about making sure their potential is fulfilled, one thing he talked about is figuring out those two things. One, thinking about the root causes of that. And so the root causes of that, as it was related to That subgroup had to do with looking at how we're coordinating services and social services for the students, so as they come back into their environment, they're not necessarily stigmatized or called out as that one particular student. So they're approaching it, figuring out how we can embed certain social services in the school to manage how to deal with students' behavior as an alternative to just kicking out and suspending. So that's how they're looking at it right now, but it's something that's in flux, but it definitely came out 2 meetings ago, directly addressing that. So right now it is being addressed as a solution for social service coordination when they return.
Okay. I just think it's an issue to be important to be looked at as a standalone issue because there was a national survey where we were highly ranked in a bad way.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay. Bethany.
Thank you for the commissioner's feedback, and thank you to the community for your questions and for your comments and for your hand claps as well. That affirms input that we need in order to meet our charge. What you're going to look at next, both community and to commissioners, is the proposed next steps that is needed for the working group. I'd like to just remind us all, center us on the next slide, if you will, of the charge of the commission convened on November 18th. And specifically, the commission is charged to collect data and research around these specific areas. Even more than that, to think of implementation around these recommendations. And specifically in this public call, we are required to deliver a report to the community as well as the governor's office by September 15th of 2015. Within this charge are the working group standard operating principles. Just to remind us all, to the co-chairs and to each of the commissioners, we agreed in our very early meetings that these would be our operating principles. Number one, that we honor community expertise in addition to the academic expertise and youth perspective that we've heard numerous times in our work. Number two, to look beyond what is today to create a model for what can be, which is what your feedback is tonight, this evening. Number three, that we have existing data, that we don't need to go reinvent the wheel. We can leverage existing data to look at evidence-based practices and recommendations. 4, we understand the principles of equity and justice to be the center of the work that we design and develop. 5, prioritizing action with a sense of urgency. And 6 is an additional component that tonight we will be asking for affirmation from the commission, an intentional application of the racial equity lens. Rich, at this point, did you want to jump in on point number 6, or do you want me to keep moving? Okay.
Good evening. Again, my apologies for our delay, but I fly both commercial and coach. And so we don't have the opportunity to make those decisions. But one of the things that we've talked about since very early on, talk about the affirmation of justice and equity in our work. There are tactical and very clear ways that we can do this work. And one of the things we also discussed was modeling for the community ways that we might move forward. Perhaps we need no more reminder than our timelines and Twitter feeds right now in the state of emergency that has been called in the state of Maryland, and the recognition that while we discuss municipal courts and while we discuss equity, while we discuss educational equity and economic inequality, we recognize that the core of why we are here and the spirit and the undergirding sin, if you will, I will use that terminology, that we are dealing with is one of race and racism. And so if in our work we do not model an approach to public policy and recommendation that does not get at the racial disparity that comes through public policy and laws, then we were not really doing our work. And so the next recommendation that we have here that we're asking that we make an official part of our work, those of you who have been in our meetings before know that we've discussed this, but we're asking for an affirmative vote from the commission, and that is simply our commitment to racial equity and reconciliation. We ask working groups to, quote, intentionally apply a racial equity lens to the work by asking the following 2 questions. First, who does this recommendation benefit? Second, does this recommendation differentially impact racial and ethnic groups? What this is very simply is the application of a racial equity lens to public policy. It is something that we will do for all comprehensive recommendations that come at the end following this affirmation. Talk about next steps. I'm just going to use my preacher voice in a minute. As we discuss next steps, we want to make sure that this is something that's being considered in the work right now. So with that, in this recommendation, which would apply A, to the work that's going on in working groups right now, B, to the final recommendations, which isn't noted here, but I want to note it for the record, will apply to all recommendations that are in the comprehensive report due September 15th. So I want to ask if there are any questions from commissioners about this first. Any questions from the public on this point? Yes, sir.
Hello, testing. The racism component. I went to a conference over the weekend. Dr. Francis Welsing, a very noted psychiatrist, gave the presentation, and one of the issues that was really brought out focused clearly and squarely on racism and white supremacy. When we dismantle this and the difficult conversation it is, we have to be open for that, because racism is a system. It is a system focusing around economics, around education, politics, entertainment, and a total of 12 different components. If we're going to dismantle this, we have to first look at the core root of it and then have open conversation. One thing that really stuck out in my mind that she brought out, and by no way can I even begin to address it with the depth that she does, but that a lot of people who are white were asking her, what can they do? And so, well, I have a white friend, isn't that enough? Or, you know, those issues. She said, well, you don't have to have, for just when you note someone who is demonstrating racist behavior, step in there and do something. Don't just be quiet. See, that's the problem. Everybody wants to be quiet. Let somebody else handle it. We have to take responsibility to set forth a new paradigm. And that paradigm means open conversation and understanding that racism is a system that has to be dismantled. And I don't know how much depth the commission is addressing that, but it's certainly something we need to look into.
So with appreciation for your statement, I totally agree with critical aspects of what you're saying. That's one of the reasons why we committed the last couple of our meetings to this discussion of really kind of setting some basic definitions for the differences between equity, equality, diversity, inclusion, and equity. And we continue that exploration as individual commissioners and as a commission broadly. But the relational aspect, we recognize we have some limitation on. And so while we will continue to encourage people and invite the community to equip and support organizations who are doing the kind of relational work that's required, and we have several of them in the community and even in the room, we also note that while the relational work is happening, there are tactical things that can be done and strategic things that can be done as relates to policy. And this is something that could be done, quite frankly, in any policy setting. Any city council, any county council, any legislative body can ask these two questions before they make a policy recommendation. And what we're seeking to do, quite frankly, is to make sure we're holding ourselves accountable to the systemic elements that you're talking about. Systems are created by policies, and so we're making policy recommendations, so we want to make sure we run these things through this kind of lens so we can approach this while the relational work continues to happen. Yes, sir.
In 2014, the Department of Justice, United States Department of Justice, along with the National Academy of Sciences, came forward with a 440-page study that addresses exactly what we were talking about, the single policy that has impacted African Americans more than anything else. I hope you folks have read this. Now, the growth of incarceration in the United States. And if you've seen that report, and you have, good, I'm glad you're shaking your head. This report addresses those issues in great depth on how, in fact, the war on drugs, and this is the Department of Justice, has been a war on black males and all the resultant impacts in the communities. I would urge everyone on this commission to read that report. This report has limitations to free some of the 2.2 million people in prisons, bring them back to the community, okay, and stop the mass incarceration. So I'm glad you shook your head on that. I think that is the single most important document this group could look at.
Appreciating that. One of the things we also wanted to note as we talk about this particular thing, this is not just, we don't want to isolate here. This is cross-cutting. So when Commissioner Gore asks about disproportionate suspensions for students, there are those who talk about that as a school-to-prison pipeline. Well, if you apply a racial equity lens to your policies as it relates to behavior in the classroom, then you don't end up in that kind of situation. You don't end up in that system. So this is something we're going to do across the board as it relates to all of them. So just wanted to make sure that wasn't lost. Maybe two more questions. Okay. Right.
I was glad to hear you talk about the racial equity lens. One of the things that, among many things that we're doing in Ferguson, we have a race relations reading group in the library, and it has been wonderful. We have, it's kind of even, maybe about 30 people, even black and white people, and we sit down and have honest, courageous, it gets a little uncomfortable, but we all have agreed this is a setting to really talk about race and be, because all of us, you know, are residents of Ferguson, we want to move the community forward, but it has been so helpful. And that's what we do. We put on the racial lens through the reading of various books, like we're reading The Invisible Man for next month, and we read The New Jim Crow, so many interesting books, but it is really helping us residents in Ferguson to really just discuss and put on our racial lens and just be honest and courageous. It's helping us. It's helping us form relationships, come together to move our community forward.
Thank you for doing that. Again, that's the important relational work that has to continue to happen. Last question here, and then we'll ask the Commissioner side.
All right. First, I'd like to thank you for enlarging to the 6th point about racism. I also was at the conference Mr. Williams mentioned. Is there any possibility that Dr. Frances Welsing could possibly even be a consultant? She is so renowned, and at 80 years old, she's done a lot of work, and she's written a lot of books and done a lot of public speaking. Is there any way at her level, which most people don't have, with such elegance, that she could possibly have some input? Thank you.
Well, you and I have had some conversations in the past about the requirements for engaging consultants. And so we recognize the relative constraints that we have. We are informed by the work of more than 70 experts who are committing their time. We would invite, of course, anyone who desires to provide that kind of voluntary support to provide it. But within the constraints that we have, I don't know that we can make that happen in under a few months, at which time we'll be needing to put out a report, to be quite frankly honest. But we're seeking to take as much information in as we can. I do want to make sure we clarify, we can be clear about the two lanes of work. There is relational work around reconciliation that needs to be done. Reconciliation is something that is in many ways social, so for some of us spiritual, but it is also something that is structural. When we talk about social disparities among people, this is structural, meaning it is impacted by policy. What we're discussing here is the application of this lens in a question before a policy is made. So we want to make sure we talk about, because it's important for us to do the relational work, but this is about saying, before I pass this law, and in our case, before we make this recommendation, we're going to ask, how does it impact black people versus white people versus Hispanic people? And that's a critical element. So I think this is a little bit of point of education, because we're used to dialoguing. We're not used to asking the Ferguson City Council, how is this piece of legislation, this ordinance, going to disproportionately impact black people? That's the question. That's what this lens is about. I know a couple of commissioners have questions, and
So forgive me for not thinking of this during our portion, but I think perhaps there needs to be an amendment to add a third question, because as much as we interrogate the recommendations and proposals that are there, we also need to be interrogating what's missing. And so I'm wondering at what point, either both looking at individual recommendations and comprehensively, to the point that I think has been made by several members of the public as well as Commissioner Gore, this third question around which inequities are not being addressed, which communities are not being addressed, and making sure that we're looking at what's not there just as much as we are looking at what is there and how it affects people disproportionately.
So would you accept the framing of that? So we're talking about asking the question intentionally in application to the work and to the recommendations. Which inequities or which communities? I'm trying to figure out how you would frame that question to state it here, just because we're asking people to act on it.
I'm going to give the wrong answer and say both and. Simply because this point about disproportionate suspensions, right, is something that third question would get to in the Education and Child Wellbeing Working Group, and that is about a particular inequity. And it is also about a particular community, right? But I think when we ask the question about a particular community, then we might have issues of language barriers and things like that come up, where it might not come up if we're talking about a specific inequity. I don't know if that example made sense, but yeah.
So is this an acceptable read? The third question would be then, and perhaps other commissioners want to write this down if it's appropriate, since we're asking you to act. If the first question is, who does this recommendation benefit? The second question is, does this recommendation differentially impact racial and ethnic groups? The third question is, which inequities and or communities are not being addressed with this recommendation or policy?
Yes.
If we were being all parliamentary, I would say I accept that as a friendly amendment.
So I would so move with the amended question.
Okay, so move with the amended question. So we have the the recommendation has been moved. Is there a second?
I've got a mic, second.
Okay, second with the friendly amendment. So we're just having a little discussion at this time. So, Commissioner Pullen.
Just to be clear for the record, when we ask the second question, does this recommendation differentially impact racial and ethnic groups? Community has to understand that sometimes the answer to that question will be yes.
Yes.
The work coming out of the Economic and Equity and Opportunity Working Group is specifically designed to address the disparities that have our region at number 42 in terms of economic mobility when we want to be in the top 10. So don't anticipate that this will always be a neutral answer. Sometimes it will answer to the affirmative based on the work. So I just want that in the record. We don't want to hear that racial, that discrimination thing. Anyway, and the other thing is when you look at this and think about this equity lens, this work is happening across the globe. And it is happening nationally. What is most similar to this is called compassionate community. There are entire cities where their boards of aldermen have adopted this lens to say, as a compassionate community, are we recognizing, understanding, and questioning our work to see how it impacts our community at every level? So what our co-chair is asking you to do is something that's in line with progressive communities. And if you want to know more about it and what it might look like, go to Compassionate Community.
Thank you for mentioning that. We also note that the Interfaith Partnership Faith Beyond Walls is leading some compassionate city conversations in the St. Louis region right now. So that's another local resource for that. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay. Seeing none, we'll invite all commissioners to act. All those in favor of the amended Point of inquiry. I'll take one question. Yes, sir.
The third question being proposed by this friendly amendment is more of a combination of both questions because they can be that question can be asked using both of these questions. The question that needs to be raised is that can we do this one in a with the lens, add in the effect of comprehensively digging to the root within the working groups that we have sustained right now.
Got it. So you make a good point. So a couple
That's
of
my
things we should,
question.
yeah, no, a couple of good things. So we should note that, and then we'll take this action. So we've got some additional support. So this is policy by policy, or recommendation by recommendation. And we recognize that while we will have an orientation toward root causes, and we're in some conversations about how we can get some support to map those things, that'll happen in each of the buckets, and we recognize that they're intersectional. What we're saying here is that we won't say anything that we've not assessed on a particular recommendation. I see what you mean about the third one kind of getting at a couple of the others. I think what you're talking about, though, is a separate conversation about root causes. We do have a commitment in our standard operating procedures about assessing those root causes, not just looking at what is, but also projecting toward what can be. And we invite more conversation about how we can effectively do that. But I think what we're suggesting is that these things, we want to make sure we apply this across the board, and that each group is giving some attention to the fact that there are intersections, the work groups are not siloed in that way. Okay? Good deal. So, commissioners, all those in favor of the recommendation as amended, please notify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay? Abstentions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're going to do a few process slides here, and we're going to ask the commission to look at our timeline and our process and formally adopt that so that our working groups have a timeline instruction. You all saw this in draft late last week and have had a chance to think about it perhaps and see if you have any questions. I'm going to get out of the way of this slide of the community and let you reinforce the notion that we do look at policies, systems, practices, and individuals to build on the earlier discussion as part of the work group final products. This is our process that we have been following, that many of you have observed, that have been to a number of meetings and been our working groups, flowing from community input through the working groups, subject matter input, back to the community for input and commission approval, then calls for action and implementation. So this is a flow chart of the processes that we have been following. This is the timeline, commissioners, that we're asking you to adopt. And that is that we've been in this April-May time frame of developing urgent calls for action and other recommendations, using the month of June to prioritize and finalize those models across working groups, but realizing that we would like your recommendations finalized, if at all possible, by June the 1st. And then we would use June to prioritize those recommendations, sort them across working groups, make sure that we have applied the lenses, which we just talked about, and process them thoughtfully with the community review as well as working group review, and then use July, August for the finalization of our report. So this ambitious time frame and working group effort is important in order for us to complete our work on time, as well as to keep the calls to action in front of us. And so I would invite any questions or comments from the commission on this time frame, realizing that our working groups have meetings already scheduled and others to be scheduled. Any questions or comments? Okay, this is our process and this is our commitment to work together to reach this. I need a motion and a second. Commissioner Albrand makes the motion. Commissioner Windmiller, a second. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. And opposed? Okay, this is our timeline. So we're now going to do a deeper dive into three particular calls for action that are on the table this evening. And I believe first we're going to start with citizen law enforcement relations, and we're going to start with child well-being first, and Bethany is going to fill in for our co-chairs there.
Again, standing in proxy for the co-chairs and able to be here tonight for child well-being, I'd like to direct your attention here to the screen. One of the specific immediate calls for action that's coming from the Child Well-being and Education Equity Working Group is here before us tonight for commissioner discussion. This working group would like to launch a regional call to action thinking about the summertime, which basically is upon us, to coordinate 30 new summer feeding programs in the North County area specifically. So on your left, you'll see that, as I talked about earlier, one of their very specific areas that they want to begin to implement now is around food insecurity. The specific call to action they're looking for is to be able to build a framework for for coordinating summer food programs, and the accountable body that they'd like to target to work with and to inquire of is the regional food banks and capacity building organizations. Just a little background research that is provided around food insecurity. Let me just ask a show of hands to those in our audience, how many are aware of this issue of food insecurity already? And commissioners as well, very well aware of that. So I'll make this very quick. We understand that nutrition is a very important element for child development. And so this is one of the key strategies that they feel undergirds their work moving forward. There is data that says 23.64% of the population in St. Louis City and St. Louis County are considered food insecure. This amounts to roughly 243,000 individuals. So with this call to action, this is the thought of the Child Wellbeing Working Group to want to affirm the Commission's ability, or